Imagine a couple in their early years of marriage, full of love, excitement, and admiration for each other. Fast forward 20 or 30 years and something has changed. The wife, once deeply in love, now seems frustrated, distant, or even resentful toward her husband. Why does this happen? The answer isn't about romance dying or attraction fading. It's about something much more practical. Marriage is often seen as a partnership, a journey two people embark on with love and commitment. In the beginning, both partners might share responsibilities, communicate openly, and support each other emotionally. However, as years pass, a subtle but significant shift occurs in many relationships. Women start feeling an increasing burden, often carrying the weight of both practical and emotional responsibilities. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but accumulates over time, leading to frustration and resentment. It's not about love disappearing, but about imbalance growing, making women feel more like caretakers than equal partners. One of the biggest sources of this imbalance is the division of responsibilities. In many marriages, traditional or not, women naturally take on more household duties, even when they work full-time jobs. Early on, they might not notice or even mind picking up the slack. They take care of things because they want their home to be peaceful and organized. But as the years go by, they begin to see a pattern. Their husbands are comfortable letting them handle the majority of the chores, planning, and day-to-day decisions. What starts as an act of love turns into an expectation, and before long, it becomes an unspoken rule. Women often juggle multiple roles: mother, employee, homemaker, problem solver, while their husbands may not feel the same level of responsibility for household tasks. They might do chores when asked, but rarely take the initiative. The mental load, the invisible work of keeping everything running smoothly, often falls on women. They remember doctor's appointments, manage school schedules, ensure bills are paid on time, and think about what's for dinner before anyone else does. Meanwhile, their husbands may assume everything is fine as long as there's no visible conflict. Over time, this imbalance becomes exhausting. Women start feeling like managers rather than partners. The frustration builds when they realize that asking for help feels more like delegation than shared responsibility. When they try to address it, they often hear responses like, "Just tell me what you need," or "I didn't know it was a big deal." But that's the point. It shouldn't require constant reminders. Women don't want another person to instruct. They want someone who notices, cares, and takes action on their own. Beyond physical responsibilities, another deep-seated issue begins to surface: the loss of emotional connection. In the early years of marriage, couples talk about everything: their dreams, fears, and little details of their day. They confide in each other, listen intently, and genuinely enjoy these conversations. But as the years pass, these meaningful discussions often fade. Conversations become centered on logistics: who's picking up the kids, what bills need to be paid, what groceries to buy. The deeper emotional exchanges that once strengthened their bond become rare. Women, who often crave emotional intimacy, begin to feel disconnected. They want to be heard, not just in passing, but with real attention and interest. When they share their feelings, they are sometimes met with dismissive responses like, "You're overthinking," or "It's not a big deal." Slowly, they stop sharing as much because they feel unheard or invalidated. Their husbands, unaware of the growing distance, might assume everything is fine as long as there are no arguments. But silence isn't peace, it's withdrawal. This lack of emotional connection is especially frustrating when women see their husbands engaging more enthusiastically with friends, hobbies, or even work. They might watch them joke around with coworkers or discuss sports with passion, yet when it comes to personal discussions at home, Their responses feel short and uninterested. It's not that their husbands don't care, it's that they've stopped prioritizing emotional engagement in the relationship. Over time, these small moments of disconnection build into something much bigger. Women start to feel lonely in their own homes, even while sitting next to their husbands. They long for someone who asks how their day was and genuinely listens to the answer. Someone who remembers what they were worried about last week and follows up. They want to feel valued, not just as a wife or mother, but as an individual with thoughts and emotions that matter. When these two issues, unequal responsibilities and emotional disconnection, combine, resentment starts to grow. Women don't just wake up one day and decide they dislike their husbands. It's a gradual process, a slow realization that they're carrying too much, both physically and emotionally, while their partner remains unaware. They begin to feel more like caretakers than lovers, more like background support than a valued equal. And the hardest part? They often don't say it outright. They may hint at it, express frustration in small ways, or even withdraw emotionally. But if their husbands don't recognize it, if they don't take the initiative to rebalance the relationship, that quiet dissatisfaction eventually turns into a deep-seated resentment. And by the time it's fully acknowledged, it's often much harder to fix. In any long-term relationship, the changes that each partner goes through are inevitable. People evolve, their values shift, their desires change, and their goals expand. But what happens when one partner, often the woman in the relationship, undergoes a transformation that the other partner seems unwilling or unable to adapt to? This is a scenario that plays out in many marriages as women grow and change while their husbands remain largely the same. The result is a widening gap that causes tension and frustration. Women often find themselves in a situation where they feel stuck, unable to move forward in a relationship that no longer feels fulfilling. When a woman grows and matures, whether it's through pursuing a new career, learning a new skill, or embracing new ideas, it's an exciting time. She feels a sense of accomplishment and purpose, and her life becomes richer and more dynamic. But in many relationships, the husband may not share this sense of growth. He may resist change, either because he's comfortable with the way things are, or he feels threatened by his partner's transformation. This resistance can manifest in subtle ways, like dismissing her new interests, discouraging her from pursuing certain activities, or simply failing to engage with her on a deeper level about the changes she's experiencing. At first, the woman might shrug it off. She tells herself that this is just part of life. She's evolving, and it's natural for people to change. But over time, she begins to feel frustrated. She looks at her husband and wonders why he doesn't seem to want to grow with her. Why doesn't he want to explore new things, try new activities, or even discuss new ideas? The frustration builds slowly, like a quiet hum in the background of their relationship, until it becomes a constant buzz that can no longer be ignored. This lack of mutual growth doesn't just cause emotional disconnection, it also creates a sense of isolation for the woman. She begins to feel like she's walking a path alone. While she's busy pursuing new opportunities and learning more about herself, her husband may remain stagnant in his routine. He might stick to old hobbies, old routines, or even old attitudes that no longer align with the person she's becoming. She longs for him to meet her at the same place, to share in the excitement of growth, and to join her in the evolution of their relationship. But when he resists change, the gap between them widens and the emotional distance grows more pronounced. This dynamic can lead to feelings of frustration and even bitterness. The woman feels as if she's doing all the work to make the relationship better, while her husband is content to sit back and let her do the heavy lifting. It feels unfair and unbalanced. She longs for a partner who is willing to put in the same effort to grow and adapt to the evolving nature of their life together. Unfortunately, many men remain stuck in old habits and old ways of thinking. They may resist new ideas, fail to support their wife's ambitions, or ignore the changes happening in their relationship altogether. This resistance to change often results in a loss of excitement and spontaneity in the relationship. Women who thrive on emotional connection begin to feel stifled by a partner who is unwilling to try new things, whether it's in the form of new experiences, new hobbies, or even new ways of communicating. The relationship starts to feel like a series of routine exchanges rather than an evolving partnership where both partners are growing together. This lack of excitement and novelty can be draining, and it can lead to resentment as women begin to feel like their efforts to bring new life into the relationship are being met with indifference. Another source of frustration comes from the lack of effort in the relationship. Early on in a marriage, both partners typically work hard to win each other's affection and admiration. They go on dates, surprise each other with thoughtful gestures, and constantly show appreciation for one another. But as time passes, this effort seems to fade. Especially in the case of many husbands, they begin to take their wives for granted, assuming that the love and affection will simply remain constant, even without any work on their part. The problem with this mindset is that relationships require constant care and attention to thrive. It's not enough to love someone once and assume that love will carry the relationship forward. Without effort, the emotional connection begins to erode. Women begin to feel neglected, unappreciated, and unseen. Their husbands may be focused on their own lives, hobbies, and responsibilities, but the emotional needs of their wives are left unmet. This lack of effort in the relationship can come in many forms. Maybe it's the absence of romance. No more flowers, no more thoughtful gestures, no more special moments. Or maybe it's the absence of emotional support. No more deep conversations, no more sharing of dreams, no more being each other's confidant. Whatever the form, the result is the same. The wife feels as if she is the only one keeping the relationship alive. She feels like she's constantly giving, but not receiving. This imbalance can lead to feelings of being taken for granted and, over time, to a sense of emotional exhaustion. As the years go by, it's easy to fall into a routine. Life gets busy, children grow older, careers demand more time, and everything starts to feel like a checklist. But when the effort stops, when the small gestures that once made the relationship feel special fade away, women start to feel unimportant. They wonder why their husbands no longer show the same enthusiasm, the same excitement, or the same interest that they once did. They begin to question whether they are still valued as individuals, not just as wives or mothers. This lack of effort, combined with resistance to change, can eventually lead to a breaking point. Women begin to feel emotionally and physically drained, unable to continue carrying a relationship that feels one-sided. They yearn for someone who will meet them halfway, who will put in the same effort, who will recognize that love is not just about living alongside each other. It's about actively nurturing the bond between them. When this effort is absent, the relationship begins to lose its spark, and the resentment that's been building slowly starts to surface, ultimately leading to a breakdown in the emotional connection that once defined the marriage. Over time, as a relationship grows older, people change, and so do their needs, desires, and expectations. Unfortunately, many couples don't adapt to these evolving dynamics in a way that fosters connection. For women, the growing emotional disconnection can be one of the most painful aspects of marriage, as it makes them feel as though they are no longer truly seen or understood by their partners. Initially, there's an assumption that the bond between them will remain strong, despite the pressures of time and change. However, when emotional intimacy fades, it begins to chip away at the foundation of their relationship. Women often look for deeper connections in relationships, seeking emotional intimacy that brings a sense of comfort and security. When this emotional connection begins to dissolve, they may start to feel isolated even in the presence of their husbands. Communication becomes less frequent, less meaningful. Conversations that once felt organic and full of shared experiences and emotions now feel like a series of transactional exchanges. The woman might talk about her day or express concerns, but her husband's responses are minimal or worse, absent. What started as a connection based on shared emotions and mutual support gradually turns into mere coexistence. This emotional void can lead to an immense feeling of loneliness. Loneliness in a marriage isn't about being physically apart, but about the lack of true emotional bonding. Women yearn for a partner who listens not just to their words, but to the emotions behind them, who understands their nuances and supports them through the ebb and flow of life. However, as the years go by, the depth of these emotional exchanges tends to diminish. Husbands may become increasingly focused on their own lives, work, or personal interests, leaving their wives to fend for themselves emotionally. This unspoken neglect can be incredibly damaging, leaving women to question whether their feelings, their struggles, or their successes matter to their husbands at all. When the emotional connection fades, women may begin to feel like they are invisible in their own homes, their thoughts and feelings unacknowledged. This isolation often leads to a withdrawal from their partners. They may stop sharing their thoughts or confiding in their husbands altogether, seeing no point in reaching out to someone who has become emotionally distant. The silence that follows only deepens the rift. What was once a relationship built on mutual understanding and shared emotional intimacy now becomes one filled with unspoken resentment and quiet suffering. Emotional disconnection can also create a shift in how women view their husbands. Once seen as a source of comfort and strength, the husband may now be seen as a distant figure. The emotional neglect can also extend to physical intimacy. As emotional distance grows, physical intimacy can suffer. Women may no longer feel as emotionally safe or connected, which impacts their willingness to engage in physical closeness. This cycle of emotional and physical disconnection can create a sense of frustration, making it harder for either partner to find their way back to the closeness they once shared. Moreover, as this emotional distance grows, women might start questioning the future of their marriage. They wonder if the person they married is still the same person they are living with today. They question their choices, their sacrifices, and whether they should continue investing in a relationship that no longer seems to provide the fulfillment they once had. For women, the loss of emotional intimacy is often the hardest to bear, because it touches the very essence of their need for connection. It makes them feel like they are giving and giving without receiving anything in return, emotionally or physically. On top of emotional disconnection, the issue of being taken for granted can weigh heavily on many women. When they start to feel as though their efforts in maintaining the household, the family dynamic, and their own personal responsibilities are unappreciated or unnoticed, it compounds the feelings of loneliness. Many women reach a point where they feel as though they are invisible in their own marriages. They do everything: plan, organize, clean, nurture, but the emotional gratitude and support they crave simply aren't there. Husbands might acknowledge these tasks on the surface level, but fail to realize the deep emotional need behind them. Women aren't just seeking acknowledgement for the work they do. They want recognition for the emotional labor they contribute to the marriage. This feeling of being underappreciated goes beyond a lack of acknowledgement for their physical work. It extends to the emotional support they give. Women often serve as the emotional backbone in the family, offering comfort to their children, soothing their husbands, holding everything together even when they're falling apart themselves. But when they no longer receive emotional nourishment in return, when their own needs are neglected, it becomes overwhelming. They start feeling as though they're carrying the emotional weight of the relationship and the family on their shoulders alone. This imbalance of effort is not sustainable, and as it continues, the woman's sense of resentment grows. She feels as though she is simply tolerated rather than truly valued. The sense of being taken for granted can make a woman question her value within the relationship. She may begin to wonder why she continues to invest in someone who isn't meeting her emotional needs or offering the same level of effort she's putting into the marriage. This emotional neglect leads to a deep frustration. She may feel trapped in a relationship where she gives everything yet receives little. It's a scenario that can build over the years, gradually eroding the love and connection that once seemed so effortless. When women feel taken for granted, they often begin to withhold emotionally. The act of withdrawing might start small, a reluctance to share their thoughts, or a decision to keep their feelings to themselves. Over time, this withdrawal grows as they begin to protect themselves from further emotional neglect. This distancing leads to a breakdown in communication as both partners struggle to understand one another's needs. The relationship becomes transactional rather than emotional, with little room for connection or growth. What is often the most heartbreaking in this situation is that it's not necessarily that the husband doesn't love his wife. It's that he doesn't recognize the emotional labor that she invests in the relationship. He might believe that as long as things are functioning smoothly on the surface, everything is fine. He may not realize that his wife feels increasingly lonely, unappreciated, and emotionally disconnected. Without open communication, these feelings remain unaddressed, growing larger and larger until they overwhelm the relationship. This deep-seated frustration and isolation create the perfect storm for dissatisfaction. Women who once felt valued and loved now feel invisible, their emotional needs ignored and their efforts unappreciated. This growing sense of resentment and disconnection, if left unresolved, can lead to a collapse in the relationship, and often, by the time the issues are acknowledged, it may feel too late to undo the emotional damage that has already been done.